Wind bent the tall grass along the burial hill as if something vast beneath the earth were drawing a slow, sleeping breath. I stood at the foot of the slope, cloak tugging behind me, fingers curled tight around the iron token at my belt. It was warm against the evening chill, warmer than living skin. Crows circled overhead without sound. I had crossed valleys to return here, to the mound I once robbed in hunger. The hill did not look robbed. It looked as though it had been waiting for me.
I began the climb as the last light thinned across the sky, each step sinking slightly into soil that felt too soft, too yielding. The air smelled of damp roots and old stone, a scent like something long sealed and slowly waking. Memories pressed close with the mist, empty traps, gnawing hunger, the thin excuse of survival. I had told myself the dead had no claim on the living, yet with every step upward, the hill seemed to lean toward me as if it had always known my weight would return. At the top, the grass grew in a near-perfect ring, darker and thicker than the rest of the hillside, fed by something deeper than rain. The token at my belt began to pulse, a dull rhythm that did not match my heart. I remembered the narrow crack in the stone, the stale breath of the barrow, the hush of dust and rot. No treasure waited inside, only bones wrapped in fallen silk, and that small blackened disc resting over a hollow chest, as if it had been placed there to keep something from rising.
Since that night, my sleep had never been empty. Dreams came heavy with marching feet across plains I had never walked, beneath banners no living tongue could name. I woke with dirt beneath my nails and the taste of iron clinging to my mouth. Roads unfolded in my mind before I ever saw them, and grief settled in me for cities long swallowed by earth. These memories did not arrive like stories. They seeped in like groundwater, cold and patient, until I could no longer tell where my own life ended.
I knelt at the crown of the hill and pressed my palm to the earth. Warmth answered from below, slow and heavy, like the pulse of something too large to die. The token slipped free from my belt and fell into the grass, landing upright as if guided by an unseen hand. A shadow stretched behind me, though the sun had already sunk, long and broad, its outline wrong for my small frame. I did not need to turn to feel it standing there, tall and crowned, a presence that carried the weight of command and the silence of a sealed tomb. The air thickened around my lungs. My own thoughts felt crowded, edged with impressions that were not mine. Stone halls lit by wavering fire, the scrape of metal on bone, a throne seen from above and below at once. I stayed still, afraid that even breath might invite the shape behind me closer, afraid that it had never truly been behind me at all, but waiting, patient, just beneath my skin.
Cold poured through me without wind, threading along my spine and settling behind my ribs like a second heart learning how to beat. Images struck in fragments, sharp and merciless. Torchlight shivering along carved pillars, a long table strewn with maps darkened by spilled wine and darker things. Faces bowed not in grief, but calculation. I felt the weight of a crown lowered onto a younger brow, the metal biting, the promise of rule already tasting of ash. Then came the betrayal, close and quiet, the kind that wears a familiar voice and a steady hand. Steel entered beneath the ribs, breath fled, the world narrowed to the echo of falling. I swayed under memories that were not memories, but inheritances, pressing against the fragile walls of my own life. My name thinned at the edges, as if another stood behind it, testing how it would sound, worn like armor.
The grass around the mound began to lean outward in widening circles, as though ranks of unseen figures were bowing in silent formation. A pressure built in the air, not a sound, but the memory of one, like distant drums felt through bone rather than heard. My pulse stumbled, then tried to fall into step with a deeper rhythm rising from the earth beneath my knees. The token twitched in the soil before me, turning slowly, drawn toward my hand as if it still belonged there. I understood then what returning it would mean. Not forgiveness, not an ending. It would be an opening, something ancient stepping forward through the narrow doorway of my living body. I saw fields trampled under spectral feet, walls shadowed by banners that had not flown in centuries. All of it waited on a single motion of my hand, on whether I chose to close my fingers or let them fall away.
Yet I had already seen what my hesitation was shaping. Villages I passed seemed dimmer, their hearth smoke thin, their people moving as if a weight pressed quietly on their backs. When they looked at me, their eyes slid aside, unfocused, as though something stood just behind my gaze and studied them in silence. Animals fled my path long before I came into view. Far off, old burial mounds split and sagged, their stones forced apart by roots that should have turned to dust. The king's will was not sleeping, it was searching, reaching through me into soil and memory alike. I had believed I was containing the curse by wandering, by never staying long enough to let harm take hold. But I was carrying it from valley to valley, like a coal wrapped in cloth, leaving the world warmer in all the wrong places, and never seeing the smoke rise until it was too late. I closed my hand around the token, and its warmth bit into my palm like a living thing that feared being buried again. For a heartbeat, I imagined turning away, walking down the far side of the hill, casting it into some deep river where silt and time might swallow its hunger. I could keep moving, as I always had, letting years dull the edge of what followed me. But the presence at my back shifted, patient and immense, and I felt how small such hopes were against a will that had already outlived kingdoms. I had stolen from the dead to buy myself another winter. Now every road I walked bent slowly toward this hill. If I fled again, the king would still rise, only farther from the place meant to hold him. My choice was no longer between guilt and innocence, but between being a door or becoming a lock. I drove the token into the soil with both hands, forcing it down as the earth parted around the metal like lips around a wound. Cold surged up my arms, needled through bone, and spread through my chest in branching veins of frost. Something vast recoiled below, then lunged, searching for height, for breath, for a throne made of living ribs. I bowed over the buried disk and held myself open, not as a vessel, but as a weight, a lid pressed hard against a rising coffin. My thoughts blurred at the edges. Chugia Gode scraped against the inside of my skull and found no door wide enough to pass. The hill shuddered beneath me. The shadow at my back strained, then thinned, dragged downward like smoke forced back into earth. When the wind finally moved again through the grass, it carried no marching memory, only the small, ragged sound of my own breathing, still mine, still mortal.